How about we get started?
I think we're ready to go.
All right, I'll start with the preamble, and I expect this to be the last one unless circumstances change drastically. But in accordance with the county's continuity of government ordinance and Virginia Code section 15.2-1413, this meeting is being held electronically over the Zoom platform. The authority directors are not physically present at a single central location. Rather, they are participating electronically. The public has real-time audio-visual access to this meeting over Zoom, real-time audio access over telephone. The public is invited to comment during the meeting's public comment period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Anyone interested in commenting should use the raise hand feature on Zoom. If you're listening by telephone, please use the *9 feature to notify the facilitator. All speakers must identify themselves and the magisterial district where they live or have a business. The meeting is being recorded. It will be made available on the county's website. And so with that, I'll call roll and ask each director to identify their general location. So we'll start with the chair, Jay Fennell.
Present, currently in Duck, North Carolina.
Let's see, Vice Chair Peter Taylor.
Present, I am currently in Nantucket, Massachusetts.
Sherry Buttrick, Sherry here.
Not expecting Sherry.
Let's see, Dr. Moses, Hamilton Moses.
North Garden.
David Emmett.
Charlottesville office.
John Moore. Is John here? I see Rose Emery.
Dark Harbor, Maine.
All right, and Sharon Merrick. There's Sharon. You're still muted. Space bar.
Yeah, I got it. I said the lovely vacationing spot of Ravenna District.
All right, Mr. Chair, we have a quorum, so we can proceed.
Excellent.
If
Do
you
we
don't,
understand that this is Carolyn's last meeting with us?
yes, and I'd like to thank everybody for, I've learned so much by coming to these meetings. I've enjoyed working with you all over the past 2 years. This is my last meeting since we will no longer be using Zoom. So I just wanted to thank you all for making me feel very welcome and glad I could help you out during COVID.
Thank you for keeping us connected and moving along. We really appreciate it.
You're very,
Yeah, thanks a lot.
you're welcome. Thank you all.
All right, so first order of business is the approval of last meeting's minutes. I'm assuming everyone's had a chance to review them. Are there any comments, corrections? Do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. A second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Emery. Any discussion? Richie, roll call, or just raise of hand?
We can do a voice vote. I presume there's not going to be any, just ask for the nays.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
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 Aye. All right,
Any
item
opposed?
number 4.
Were there any
Cost elect.
opposed?
Any opposition? Okay. I will turn things over to Scott Clark, Cost-Elect timbering plan.
Just making sure I'm unmuted. Thank you. Yes, first item tonight is a timbering plan approval on a donated easement. And this is the Clifton Lake property. You all accepted an easement back in 2014. It's a 64 point, well, the whole thing is a 64.5 acre property. It was formerly vertically split, as you'll see in a moment, but has since been reconfigured into this altered 2-parcel arrangement as permitted under the deed. And we are talking about the southern of the two for today's proposal. The deed requires that forestry on the property be done according to a forest stewardship management plan. and requires that the authority approve a pre-harvest plan before any timbering. And you all have had both the stewardship plan and the pre-harvest plan with the agenda materials. This property, as you see here, can't quite explain the tilt of the recorded deed map, except that maybe it's correcting for declination, but this shows the 200-foot riparian buffers that were placed on the pond and on another stream, as this property is very close to the main stem of the Ravenna River. Mr. Haney, the consulting forester on this project, has prepared both of the plans that you've seen. The pre-harvest plan, which is the one you all need to act on, details a lot of BMPs for the timbering and post-timbering work and correctly identifies the 200-foot buffers to be avoided by the timbering work. You can see that Mr. Haney has added a couple of 50-foot buffers on very small drainages that weren't identified in the easement. So there's a bit more buffering under this plan than is strictly required by the terms of the deed. So we would recommend that the authority approve this pre-harvest plan and authorize staff to issue an approval letter for it.
Thanks, Scott. Any questions?
I actually do have a question or two. I'm not very familiar with these forest management plans or timbering plans. So it says it's going to be a selective cutting, not. So I presume that means not clear cutting, or they mentioned sort of a high grading scenario. The one thing I didn't really see in any of the documents was any discussion about how the trees were going to be cut or what trees were going to be cut. And I wasn't sure whether that's normal or did I miss something or just.
Yeah, I had exactly the same reaction. And I was hoping that Mr. Haney was going to be here. We did invite him to be here to talk about his timbering plan. However, since I hadn't heard back from Mr. Haney, I decided to go ahead and read up on pre-harvest plans on the forestry site. And I did a bunch of research and looked at comparable examples and things. And it appears to be fairly normal that the pre-harvest plan is really a plan for the BMPs more than it is for the actual selection of trees to cut. So really what it's addressing is how are they going to avoid erosion, protect water quality, ensure those BMPs are in place, stay out of stream buffers. And again, as I mentioned, Mr. Haney amended this at my request to show the correct 200-foot buffers. So yes, while I had the same reaction you did about the lack of detail as far as specific tree selection, it appears that this is a pretty standard approach for a pre-harvest plan for a property like this.
So is there more to come or is this it?
This is it as far as you all are concerned. I think a lot of the remaining work happens on site. So the selection is likely to happen while the forester and the timbering operators are out there on the site actually cutting, rather than having a map identifying trees to be cut or something in advance that they're going to do that in the field. That's my impression from having read over other examples and sort of guidance information on the forestry site.
You know, because from our standpoint, I guess I mean, the BMPs and the buffers and all of that, I'm sure are more than adequate and all of that, but are they going to clear cut what's left? And are they allowed under the terms of the easement to clear cut? It's just not clear to me. No.
Well, they are. I mean, there's nothing in the easement that says that they must do a selective cut or that they must only cut certain slices or that they can't clear cut.
Okay.
All it says is there must be a stewardship plan, which there is,
Okay.
and that the authority has to approve the pre-harvest plan to find that it's in accord with that stewardship plan, which to my mind it is. That stewardship plan isn't horribly detailed about the cut, but that's not one of the criteria the authority is asked to weigh in on.
All right. Well, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but I do have it'd be an interesting topic for discussion at another time.
Scott, this proposal, as I recall, provoked quite a lot of discussion about timbering plans among the authority.
Several of them have, yeah. I mean, we've had a lot of back and forth about different positions about how deeply the authority should get into this, if at all.
But this plan, as I recall, a critical issue here was to protect the view shed because of the amount of development around the property. And as I recall, we had at this time a presentation by the Department of Forestry that cautioned us that timbering plans would not comment on the effect on the view shed or the effect on adjoining properties unless it was required to do so. So the question is, should we ask for an impact statement on the view shed?
There's nothing in the easement that discusses impacts on other properties. The timbering terms are fairly basic, and then they just say that the authority should make a finding on whether or not the harvest plan is in accord with the management plan.
Yes,
and
I
the
know,
terms of
but
the easement.
I remember this easement, and the reason that language was placed in the deed was in order to allow us to review the effect on the view shed.
I'm not sure the language does do that, but and having done some of these, I don't specifically remember the discussion around this one. So I wish I could remember more so I could be more helpful.
The purpose of having this authority approve the plan was so that we could protect the view shed. And that's an entirely legitimate area for concern for a conservation easement.
I agree with that, but it seems to me that the easement as it's written will either describe the view shed as part of the conservation purpose or not. And again, in my personal view, clear cutting is worse than virtually anything. And so I agree in principle with it, but it seems to me that whether we move forward on that should be determined by what the easement says. The other thing that I would point out is that from a conservation perspective, the reforestation is really important. And what you tend to see with these loblolly pine plantation is that it results in a monoculture that is really not good from a ecological perspective over time. They're short-lived trees. They crowd out all other vegetation. They die if they're not harvested, and there are bad consequences as a result of that. I'm experiencing that. It was some land at my farm right now that is pure loblolly. So, again, I think it's important that going forward, we understand if timbering does take place, what the reforestation includes and that it's balanced. And to the extent that we can opine on the view shed, I think we should.
I would suggest in the light of Peter's comments that we ask the property owner to come back with us with some photographs and a statement of what they intend to do and its effect on the view shed, and also encourage them not to clear cut, but to add a number of trees, to maintain a number of old growth trees that would be appropriate and that would affect would diminish the effect of the timbering. That in fact was the recommendation of the forestry department, as I recall it.
In the end, and I agree with a lot of what Mr. Taylor said about forestry, and in the end, I will take whatever message you all decide on back to the landowners. My concern is just to avoid a potential conflict, because the language in this particular deed, whatever the original intention was, is not particularly strong as far as controlling the character of forestry on the site. We have a lot of deeds that control even less, especially the ACE easements that obviously intend for timbering to go on. We have others that very strictly control timbering, either requiring specific standards or prohibiting it outright. This one, I'm afraid, since it says pretty clearly that the authorities action is only to approve the pre-harvest plan, and that is only to be a finding that it's in accord with the management plan, with the purposes of the easement, that there's a chance that there's going to be a protest here, that the authority is asking for more than the easement actually controls. And maybe Richie can weigh on that better than I can. But while I'm happy to take whatever message back that you all want, I am a little concerned that this, it seems like we're trying to require more than a fairly basic deed like this is actually laid down.
Well, let me ask you this in light of what you just said. Are there specific parameters by which we're supposed to be assessing this pre-harvest plan? Because if it's coming to us for approval, we could just as easily not approve it, right?
Give me just a moment here and I'll pull up the language of the deed. I've got the deed open. Just want to find the right page and share it to you. Let's see.
The way I'm reading the management of the forest, the best management practices applies to the control of erosion and to protect water quality when any timber harvest is undertaken. And so then a material timber harvest is to be guided by the stewardship management plan. The pre-harvest plan consistent with stewardship management plan shall be submitted to this authority no earlier than 1 year nor later than 30 days. And the approval is limited to a determination of whether or not the pre-harvest plan is in compliance with the forest stewardship management plan and is consistent with the purposes and restrictions of the easement. And then when I looked at the commercial and industrial uses, the forestal uses, they include timber harvesting. And of course, it also approves agricultural uses. And I've looked, because it sounds like this authority and this board was pretty adamant that the view shed should be protected, but I don't, if that was the intention, I don't see that it made it into the easement. And my file is pretty sparse in terms of details.
Well, the plan talks about selective cutting, but nowhere is selective cutting defined or explained.
That's what I'd like some clarity on too, in terms of diameter, minimum, etc.
It also talks about invasive species. If they go in there and cut all the trees or even most of them, what's the first thing that's coming back? Invasive species. And there's nothing in there that talks about the control of invasive species. I mean, I
think it was left fairly
sense to me in terms of a management plan or anything. It falls short somehow.
Richie and Scott, just as a general principle, any easement that this authority holds and must enforce, someone will see as ambiguous. Someone will see as incomplete. Someone will see as not addressing every eventuality. And we've struggled over many years at how to interpret where there is ambiguity, in the presence of ambiguity. The recent legislation in the Commonwealth, I believe, was aimed at addressing that ambiguity in conservation easements, and it grants a very specific ability and duty to interpret where there is ambiguity in favor of the conservation purpose of the easement. It removes the ambiguity of the ambiguity. That was legislation, I believe, 2 years ago. So we do have an ability to make a prudent decision based on conservation principles. And clearly forestry is a conservation principle. So in this instance, it would be entirely reasonable to simply ask the landowner, come back to us with a little more information. We're not saying, no, don't do it. Just give us some more information. And that may resolve our reservations.
I agree. And I'd like to, if we do it, is to be able to back it up by language that we have in the easement to, like give them a factual reason why we're asking for it. It's not just an opinion of our interpretation of one of those ambiguities that wasn't clearly defined in the easement.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but it looks like Mr. Haney, who prepared the forestry plan, has just arrived. So,
Yeah, Mr. Haney, yeah, he accepted my,
okay, so he's
okay.
been promoted up to the point where he can speak. So perhaps Jay, if you want to quickly explain what the authority's questions are, and then we can get into a discussion from there.
Yeah, so Mr. Haney, welcome. Looks like you're on mute right now.
Thank you.
Great. So our questions are the erosion controls. Those look great. Our questions are in terms of the definitions of the select cut, size of trees, types of trees, age, view shed impact, and then down the road reforestation to prevent the establishment of invasive species. Can you kind of shed some light on the?
Absolutely. I think your easement, the requirement in the easement language said that it requires a forest stewardship plan and a pre-harvest plan. What you are reviewing there is a complete forest stewardship plan and pre-harvest plan. That is meets the criteria of the Virginia Department of Forestry's definition of a forest stewardship plan. It specifically states in there that it is a selective harvest. A visit to the site will show you that each tree that has been designated for harvest has paint on it. That's not to suggest that in the process of taking down other trees, that smaller trees aren't impacted, as would be in any typical logging job. As far as the BMPs, they've all been spelled out in there with the language of the BMP manual as prescribed by the Virginia Department of Forestry. That is a standard clause in all of my contracts, as well as a requirement in order for the stewardship plan to qualify in the Virginia Department of Forestry's program. So it meets all of those guidelines as required by the easement.
Thank you.
And was there a second part to that question that I missed as far, reforestation. This is a hardwood select cut, so we are not changing the nature of the stand. It is with all hardwood stands that you are choosing not to convert to a pine plantation. You in all of Virginia, you would rely on natural regeneration, which means you would have stump sprouts from the trees that are harvested, and you would have new sprouts that would come from seed source that's already in the soil.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members?
I have
Mr.
a
Haney,
question.
approximately what percentage of the trees in the stand will be removed?
All of those with paint on them. Your a fully stocked stand probably has, 300 trees per acre. We're probably have targeted, I don't have the exact number, but I'm guessing somewhere around 15 trees per acre.
Are you targeting specific species?
No, in typical language of a select cut, what we are doing there is more the more technical definition would be a shelterwood cut, where you are targeting species, all species, so that you don't remove only the good and leave the bad. You want to take bad out as well as good, as far as quality, species, and value. If you only take the best and you leave the rest, then you're lowering the quality of that stand in the future.
Mr. Haney, did I understand your previous answer that there are about 300 per acre and you're going to be removing 15 per acre?
Yeah, again, I don't have a tree count of every tree out there per acre, but I'm saying typically you would think that you're in the 300 trees per acre would be a reasonable expectation. And in a typical single tree selection process, 15 trees per acre or something like that. Let me see, I can run some quick numbers here. No, let me. Yeah, so that's about, yeah, one. Yeah, so that roughly comes out to just the numbers that I'm recalling off the top of my head. It would back into something like 13 trees per acre. And what I'm doing is looking at my total volume I'm removing over the number of acres that I'm removing it, and then dividing it by an average volume per tree to back into my trees per acre.
Would you be willing to assure this body that you would not be removing more than 5% of the existing trees?
No, I'm not going to say that today. I don't know. All I can tell you is that it's a single tree selective harvest. And it meets the criteria of the easement. It meets the criteria of a forest stewardship plan, which is the requirement of the easement. I mean, technically, if my reading of the easement is correct, the landowner would be allowed to clear cut the property. Is there any language in that easement that says he can't clear cut it? But that has not been my recommendation. I don't have the language of the easement right here in front of me, but Scott, are you online? Are you in this? Because Scott's got the language to the easement. I know because he sent it to me. Does it say anywhere in there that you would not be allowed to clear cut this, Scott?
It does, and so this is Rich Delory. I'm with the county attorney's office.
Hey, Rich.
It does have it does have a recital in there which is incorporated into it that talks about the protection of the property by the easement would yield significant public benefits because of the public utility, the public's ability to enjoy the scenic values of the property and the prevention of natural resource degradation, including forest cover loss that would be caused by residential development of the property. So there is reference to preserving the forest cover.
As a result to residential development. Did I not hear you say that?
That's what it says. That would be caused by residential development.
Okay, but just so that would not prohibit forest management. And the language in the easement that I was presented did not restrict forest management.
I think forest management is contemplated by the easement.
I misunderstood. I'm not clear.
No, I'm saying you're correct. Forest
Yes.
management.
Yeah. So unless there's
a
a use change, the number of trees removed is less of an issue than whether or not it's sound forest management. Correct?
I may defer to Scott on that one, sir.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm just going by what the reason said to what the language that was presented to me. I did not see a restriction in how the forest could be managed. I just simply saw that it had there we go, it just got put up.
Yeah, so sorry.
Yeah, so there it is.
There's this section, which is this more specific section about the management, and then above that's 2F, and then up here in 2C is what Richie was just talking about in 2C3, which is the more general statement that these forestal uses, including reforestation, site preparation, timber harvesting, forest management, are permitted. That section then refers you down to 2F, which we're just looking at for the stewardship plan standards, and also refers to 2I and saying that forestry uses are not permitted in the buffer area, which is why those are shown in the map. So I think this is the part we're focusing on here in 2F1. And I hope that's visible to you all. I know it's a little small, but if I zoom in too far, we lose a lot of it.
Well, they're not planning to clear cut it, and we're not under the impression that they're going to clear cut it. So,
well, but I guess my point in that we're getting into the weeds as to how many trees there are per acre, how many trees we're harvesting, when clearly the F1 it says BMPs by followed by Department of Forestry, which is already in the plan, and then forestry pre-harvest plans. So, and then, consistent with purposes and restrictions of this easement forest management. Yeah, I don't see anywhere in there that is offering any restrictions on forest management.
No, it's just that the language of the stewardship plan talked about a selective cut, but the selective cut wasn't defined anywhere, so we were curious what that actually meant. So you've
Well,
shed a
that's-
lot of light, you shed a lot of light on that, and that's great.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a pretty
thank you.
standard language for forest management.
Mr. Haney, I have a question. In the memorandum, it says that the pre-harvest plan also identifies best management practices to be followed during and after the proposed harvest. And I noticed on page 15, there's a 10-year recommended schedule, and you've got that in 2022, the selective harvest, and then it looks like future is 2032. So I guess my bottom line question is, after you do this harvest, what do you anticipate the land to look like? Are there stumps? Are there limbs? Is it clean? Is it replanted? What do you think it looks like post-harvest?
I mean, it will be your typical selective harvest. The logs will be removed. I would expect that most of the pulpwood would be removed as well. That is not always the best of choices. I like utilization, but I also find that if some of those tops are left, I get better regeneration because the deer are generally pretty lazy and they're not willing to walk up into a lap to graze off the stump sprouts. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. If you leave them, you get better regeneration. If you take them, sometimes the regeneration is a little slower. You got to get more vegetation growing to distract the deer to keep from eating your seedlings that are coming up that are desirable. So that's a never-ending battle through the whole work area for me, is battling deer. As I said, it's all natural regeneration. So the seed source is already there, and the stump sprouts will come from the trees that are harvested.
Mr. Haney, would it be a great burden for you to return in a few weeks with additional information about the number of trees as a percentage that will be removed and its effect on the viewshed?
That's going to take time and energy. I do not see where that is a requirement of the easement. The easement's very clear that it requires a stewardship plan and a pre-harvest plan, which Mr. Kostelak has engaged me to provide. Again, by the easement, I think clear cutting is permitted. I'm not proposing it. I discourage that, particularly in a situation like this. So I'm not sure what the value of that information is. And I don't have, actually, I'd have to go back and do another inventory to collect that, to have that hard data.
But Mr. Haney, the reason that we're dwelling on this is that this easement, the reason that a forestry management plan was included was because of specific concern about its effect on the viewshed. And it provoked a good deal of discussion among the authority at the time, and including some briefings by the Department of Forestry about what we should expect and what we should expect to see in a plan. That's the genesis of my question.
Okay, help me with the view shed, because we have buffers pretty much around the property. We specifically took that into consideration. And if you're looking from across the lake, you shouldn't see any impact. Neighboring properties, I don't know that there's going to be a visual impact to any of, there's only one house that has any view shed of the property. And I think that's adequately buffered as well. And if it seems to me then the issuing of the easement would have been put further restrictions on the type of timber harvest specifically that the easement was going to allow. And the language of this easement, I haven't seen where those restrictions are placed. So from a visual perspective, then I would have thought language would have been there that said that clear cutting would not be allowed.
Just to clarify for everybody, what we're talking about is, I think the closest house that Mr. Haney's talking about is this one here, which is on the
Correct.
other parcel under this easement.
Correct.
So there's the 200-foot stream buffer along this edge, along this edge, the 200-foot pond buffer on this edge. There isn't a buffer between these two parcels that are under the same easement. But I don't know how much visual impact there's going to be on this particular property.
You
It
can't
seems
see
like-
that house from this property now. The one right there at the, what is it, 79C 0A14, Scott, up there on the entrance road would be the closest. But our intention is to maintain that woods edge there. We will be setting a deck, as you saw in the maps further in. So the visual to, yeah, there's not much view shed issues for anybody to be impacted by.
The main
Mr.
harvest area is
Haney,
which is
um,
here. I'm sorry, Ms.
Mr.
Mary, go
Haney,
ahead.
why are you, I'm sorry. Mr. Haney, why are you suggesting select cut versus clear cut?
I do a lot of hardwood forest management. Clear cutting, when I came through school, the common joke was it's clear cut, chop and burn. The theory being at that time that gave you the best regeneration. Remembering that, Virginia Tech is producing a lot of young foresters to work in the pine belt. Well, I didn't necessarily gravitate towards that, and I spend more time working in hardwood. And over the years, we figured out that clear cutting is not necessarily mandatory to regenerate a quality hardwood forest. We demonstrated this some years back down at Montpelier. We did a lot of shelterwood harvesting there. We had some criticism, so we brought in the dean of the School of Forestry and did some tours to show that shelterwood harvesting absolutely can regenerate a quality forest while preserving the aesthetics of the property. Everybody knows that clear cut's ugly, not necessarily bad, but ugly. It softens the visual, maintains the feel of a forest while you get the regeneration of the desirable species for your next stand.
Well, this has been very helpful. Thank you very much.
Mhm. Whoop.
Did we lose our chairman?
It looks like we lost Jay. Did we lose Jay?
We must have.
Nope, looks like he's trying to come back.
Okay, I was gonna say, we still have a quorum. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah.
If
Yeah, I had you guys, but you guys didn't have me. So I followed the whole thing. Mr. Haney, thank you. That was very informative. What's our next step in this discussion, folks?
I think there would need to be a motion at this point. It's
Right.
discussion.
Sorry, I got disconnected there for a moment.
That's all right. Seems to be part of the process. Ms. Taylor?
My belief is that the forestry plan meets the criteria spelled out in the easement and best management practices. There certainly are easements with much more specific language associated with timbering and reforestation, but they're not in this easement. And from where I sit, the proposal as it's submitted meets the criteria that we've been asked to opine on. One man's opinion.
If you'd like to turn that into a motion.
So I would make a motion that we approve the timbering plan as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second,
Can we add to the motion that then staff would be permitted to send a letter to the landowner documenting the approval?
Yes.
Okay. So we have two motions. Further discussion. Yep, I agree that this meets the criteria that we've asked for. And overall, it does seem like best management in terms of erosion with the BMPs and just in terms of the reforestation and reestablishment of habitat also. If there's no further discussion, we can move it to a vote. Okay, Richie?
Let's see, Sharon Merrick,
Yes.
Rose Emery,
Aye.
John Moore,
Aye.
Mr. Emmett,
aye.
Dr. Moses,
Aye.
Sherry's absent. Let's see, Peter Taylor
Aye.
and Chair Fennell.
Aye.
All right, so the motion passes.
All right. Mr. Haney, again, thank you for educating us.
I'm on a Zoom meeting and I can't do it in there.
Sounds like somebody else has issues with animals as well. I'm glad I just got in and was glad that I was able to get zoomed in with you and answer some questions. So thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, bye.
All right. Item number 5, Chester Music Hall dwelling size request. Scott?
Yep, hang on just a moment.
All right. Mr. Manning, Mr. Blaine, welcome back again.
Great to see everybody again. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here.
Alrighty, apologies for the delay there. Having a few technical issues as usual. So just to remind everyone where we stand, this is the proposal for a increased dwelling size on the Music Hall ACE easement property shown on the map here. And you all have discussed this twice before. The deed permits one dwelling, main dwelling up to 7,000 square feet unless prior written approval is obtained from each grantee, meaning you all plus the board, as well as 2 accessory dwellings. There's currently only 1 dwelling left on the property of about 1,300 square feet. At the authority's last meeting, the revised proposal that was presented was for 11,500 square feet for a new main dwelling and to limit those accessory dwellings that don't have a specific size in the original deed to 4,500 square feet. The authority voted 5-2 to deny that proposal and requested the landowner return with a proposal that adheres more closely to the permitted sizes typically included in the authority's easements. The current proposal retains that 11,500 for the main dwelling and would reduce the accessory dwellings to 2,000 square feet. Just looking at how that compares to other easements, we unfortunately don't have a lot of records of, or any really records of previous decisions on approvals for larger dwellings. So we don't have a a body of precedent to refer to. We do have other easements in this size range, the ones listed here on the screen. I just took easements, whether they were ACE or donated, that were in the 65 to 85 acre range that bracket this 76 acre easement. You can see they vary quite a bit. There's one that has no dwellings at all. A few that are on have the typical 4,500 square foot limit. All of those you see that have an asterisk are easements that permit that size limit to be extended by permission. As far as I know, none of those have ever come in for that request, but they do allow it. The largest one I think on here that is permitted is 7,500 square feet for the Greer easement. That was an existing dwelling that was already there, I believe. And so that's what we have as far as typical sizes that are permitted in this acreage range. But again, we don't have any record of size, larger sizes that were permitted to fall back on to give any real guideline as far as percentage goes. So really, in a way, this is more of a discussion item, and that we need to get some sort of consensus from the authority of whether or not this current proposal is what you all intended with last month's action or not. And need to, since we don't have a formula to go by or a record to go by, we need to try to have a discussion that leads to some sort of consensus. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Obviously, you'll already know that Mr. Blaine and Mr. Manning are already here to answer your questions.
Thank you, Scott. Mr. Blaine or Mr. Manning, do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, just briefly, if I could, I just want to say how kind of grateful I was to the committee for the last call. I think at the end of the call, I requested that, you all give a little bit of guidance on what you would accept and what the spirit of the board would be. And we got a scatter shot so we tried to triangulate where we could find where everyone would be happiest. What's the age-old adage? Everyone leaves negotiation pretty happy. It was a good negotiation. And so what we tried to do is, I know dwelling size or ancillary dwelling size was a concern of the board, and we had people from Dr. Moses, who was kind of on one side about the size of the dwellings, up to the two individuals that voted with us. And so what we decided to do was bring our easement exactly in line with what you guys are currently doing on ACE, or have been doing with your current easements for ancillary dwellings, to be at that 2,000 square foot cap. So this easement would surrender all of its ambiguity on the kind of non-cap ancillary dwelling sizes, so we could kind of make sure that this goes into perpetuity, being a little more in line with what you guys typically are leaning towards these days. And I don't know if this was mentioned, the second, one of the two ancillary dwellings we would like to leave is the cottage that is currently on the property. We just left a little bit of variance in there because the cottage is going to need a little bit of renovation. It's fairly old, and we want to make sure we can bring it back to kind of its glory. And we just wanted to leave a little room in there because there are some pretty tight rooms that we would just like to see if we needed to bump out in a direction or so, that we had the flexibility to do that. But the intent of one of those ancillary dwellings is to be used for that cottage. And again, just want to say how much I appreciated all the feedback on the last meeting, and we just know we took it to heart and really tried to come to a place where hopefully we all can we can come to some middle ground on the purpose of getting this done, so you guys don't have to see me on Thursdays anymore. Although I will maybe come just to watch, because it is entertaining and you learn something every time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Blaine, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't, unless there are any questions from panel members.
Panel members, questions, comments?
Scott, at the time the ACE program accepted this easement, what structures were on the property?
There were two dwellings. One was approximately 3,500 square feet. And then the other dwelling that's there still now is 1,300. Those two have been there all along. At some point, the 33,000 or 3,500 square foot house was demolished.
And the deed permits a new dwelling of 7,000 square feet. Is that correct?
Right, it's phrased as a main dwelling up to 7,000 and then 2 accessory dwellings. And unfortunately, the deed does not give a size limit for the accessory dwellings, which is something we definitely would do in deeds these days.
Did they ever, was that an oversight in this case?
I wouldn't say it was an oversight. I would say that deeds of that era and earlier for this body and for several other holders in the county tended to be a bit more casual and referring to the size of accessory dwellings or guest houses or things like that. They tend to set a limit for one and refer to the others as lesser or accessory or something and leave people to figure it out.
Right, yeah, it was a given that main accessory and dependencies were by nature smaller than main dwelling, but we never stated it anywhere.
Scott, I'll add also, this was an ACE easement, and those tend to be somewhat not as detailed as the donations, at least historically.
Right.
So as a nearby property owner, I and probably the most laissez-faire member of this body, to my way of thinking, there's no one size that fits all. You have to look at easements and building sizes as they relate to the individual property and how that conforms with the area. And Scott, it was interesting that you pulled the our easements in terms of housing size, but if you look at the neighboring properties that are almost contiguous to Music Hall, most of them are BOF easements, and in many cases, they're houses like Airsley, which is right across the road, which is a very large house, and in fact was just added to with another building on 50 acres. So along the Southwest Mountains, really starting at the Keswick Post Office and going to Sismont, the nature of the dwellings.
I'm doing a Zoom call, but I can't get in there. Sorry.
Oh. We have some people over for drinks.
Oh, they come.
Now we're getting to the important stuff.
So,
but again, if along the Southwest Mountains, the dwellings are uniformly large. And so my way of thinking, this is not inconsistent with the area and the neighborhood that it's in. I have a problem when we start using taste as a criteria for easements. I think that gets us into trouble. I think it gets us into enforcement issues, and the size of a house, to my way of thinking, is largely a taste issue. The other point I would make is that for better or for worse, this property is contiguous with a 600-acre parcel, which is in conservation easement. And so other than 2 farms along Route 22 and 231, everything is in conservation easement. So it's not as though this will be part of a series of large houses that will change the nature of the road in the community. And while Brian doesn't own the contiguous land, it still is an easement and has very strict development concessions. So I think that the proposal, particularly with the limit on accessory dwellings, which is otherwise not part of the ACE easement, and the fact that the ACE easement extinguished 13 development rights, which is an enormous public benefit, that we should approve this proposal. One man's view.
Thank you. Any more comments?
Well, I take Peter's take on the environment around this property. But in order to accept any modification of the original easement, we have to believe that it is in keeping with the conservation purpose. The purpose of an ACE easement is slightly different than of another conservation easement in that the emphasis is on agriculture. We're talking about dwellings. If the original easement language were to be applied, we would have 7,000 square feet of a potential new dwelling, plus the 1339 that remains. Plus, was it, you said, Scott, another dwelling of about 3,500 at the time of the original easement?
Well, yeah, at the time, when it was first recorded, the 3,500 would have been the main dwelling, so it was the largest. And then there was one accessory.
To put a stake in the ground, I would propose that we accept an increment of the total dwelling square footage that is not in excess of 25% of that number.
25% of
25% of what would have been permitted under the deed and what existed on the property at the time.
Could I ask if that 25% is an arbitrary figure that you, or not?
It's an arbitrary figure, but it's based on, it's not 50%, which changes the nature of a property, and it isn't 10%, which is really perhaps insignificant. And 25% is not 50%, and it isn't 200%. So it is an arbitrary figure, but we need a figure by which to avoid Peter's objection that we're being arbitrary or dealing with aesthetics, which we're not prepared to do.
So that would put the cap at about 10,375.
For all
feet.
three dwellings or for just the main dwelling?
For all three, but you know, the easement left the door open for, you know, they capped it at 7, they put the 7,000 there, but the door was still left open to come back for approval for extension. And that's, I see it as playing completely within the rules too, and living up to the spirit of the easement. And it's not lost on me also by these guys voluntarily putting a 2,000 square foot cap on the accessories when there were no caps also. And so in that regard, I feel like it's actually enhancing the easement.
I'm not sure if I'm doing the right math problem here, but if you treat the two houses that were there as secondaries and add a 7,000 square foot house to that, then what you get is about 11,800.
Yep, I didn't add that the original dwelling in there. Thanks.
That's one way of looking at it. That's not meant to push the discussion either way. I just that was a possible outcome under the term.
Here's another look at the numbers, and we talked about it last time a little bit. Just given what he said, if we're trying to look at how the easement read, so we've got a 7,000 number in there, and just like Scott said, the main house music hall was 3,500 square feet. The existing cottage 1,300. You know, that puts you around 11 something. And what's on the table is 11.5 plus 2 plus 2. Okay, so that puts us at 15.5. If you were looking at this today and said, okay, I can do 7,000 in a single family dwelling, and I can have 2 accessory buildings. And in today's world of 2022, bigger is better. And I'm going to build 2 4,000 square foot accessory buildings, then you're back up to 15,000. So by trading in the accessory buildings and making them each 2,000 and taking your main house to 11.5, you're back at 15.5. it's swapping numbers around a little bit, and you are getting something by having two smaller identified accessory dwellings.
Yeah,
I'm just because there's vagueness, just because the easement says you may come back and ask for an enlargement doesn't mean that we have to give it. It
Correct.
just, you have the right to do it, right to request. You don't have the right to necessarily have it enlarged. And it worries me that we set a precedent with other people who want a larger house. And I think they've made concessions, but I don't really call 12.5 to 11.50 that much of a concession. I mean, I realize the two outbuildings, it's 4,000 square feet they've given up, but I'm disturbed about people coming back, setting a precedent is really what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I would also point out that that problematic statement that this body may approve is a statement that's often recommended to put this body in exactly this position. And it requires interpretation. It's usually recommended by the attorneys who draft the document. And we've discouraged it in other documents just for this reason. But go back to the first principle. The purpose of the ACE program is to preserve agriculture. There's no mention of agriculture here. There's also no mention of the commercial restrictions. And I would find great comfort if we would have additional restrictions on no commercial use and definitions of what that no commercial use will be. My concern, Peter, is that your area in Keswick, which is challenged by water and by many other things, is going to turn into a destination for venues. And if you look at the combination of properties around this one, it is an invitation for conversion to commercial use. That's my concern. It's not the size of the structure or the number of accessory structures of their size. It is the potential for this to be turned into other uses, not for an individual owner.
By commercial, do you mean like winery, brewery uses or wedding events, things like that?
That's exactly right.
Chip, I fully understand your point. And, I hate to say it, put the horses sort of out of the barn to some extent. And I think that, that our efforts along those lines really should be focused on the state, who, as we all know, determined that events at wineries, et cetera, were agricultural in nature and therefore allowed. But it's, again, it's hard to see how this property, with the others that already exist, would be commercially viable as another event space. And I don't see it. But it's true that there are a lot of tasting rooms and wineries in Keswick. And in fact, Governor Youngkin was in the area recently, encouraging that movement.
Peter, the state's saying that tasting rooms and so forth are agriculture applies to zoning, not to conservation easements, and certainly not to ACE easements, which have agricultural purpose from their start, meaning real agriculture. That's the entire rationale for the program. And this is not a new easement. This is an old easement that we're being asked to modify. So I have sympathy with your position, but I think in this case, we possibly could move on the size above 7,000 square feet. But let's look at other assurances that this property not be converted to other purposes.
Brian, Steve, Mr. Manning, Mr. Blaine, you can see where the direction that we're heading in. What would your thoughts be on adding wording restricting potential future use of, but preventing it from becoming another wedding event venue or tasting room.
That one.
I don't want anybody on my property that for a wedding, I'll tell you that. My wedding was 20 people, and I think that's the total amount that I really would ever want. As it relates to adding in, non-commercial rights language into the easement, I hear the point. I understand the point. I have zero intention to convert this into a wedding destination, brewery, tasting room, having cars tear up my grass and, the apple trees I want to plant. So we have no intention of doing that. My hesitation, and I think many of you would understand this, is, these easements are designed to last for hundreds of years, and I intend for this farm to be in my family for as long as we possibly can, with our passing down from generation to generation, and being a good steward of this land and being a good steward of this family. I couldn't in good conscience make the decision to take something as kind of broad reaching as all commercial rights off of the land, because I just think that would be a bridge too far of my authority as just as a tenant of this land for future generations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not you that we're worried about.
And if that indeed is your position, I don't know why you would object to us putting some restrictions on it, because what you're saying is entirely precatory. It's not, it's only what you are saying, these easements go down to the next generation.
Yeah, yes, I agree. But as a good steward of kind of the land and of the future, I don't feel like I have the right to make that decision for generations 100 years from now. That feels like that would be bad tenantship of the land from my standpoint.
I get that.
If I can just try to clarify, and I certainly don't want to speak for Dr. Moses, but are we talking about further limiting commercial use on the property in general, or just assuring that the one dwelling that is exceeding the permitted size would not itself be used for commercial uses, other than home offices?
I would advocate that there be further restriction on commercial use of the property in its entirety.
And I would agree with that.
So, these ACE easements, of course, they aren't really vetted through us when they're made, and we inherit this part of it, this amending part. But my question, what is the nature of the commercialization clause in the ACE easement? I'm not familiar with.
Hang on just a moment, I'll put that up. Too many windows. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry, hang on. That's
He's
there we go.
Chairman, I don't know if everyone has a copy of the easement, if someone's pulling it up, but there is a prohibition against commercial and industrial uses, and excluded would be agricultural uses that are pretty specifically defined. And I understand.
Can you all see that now?
Yeah, I understand that. That's on page 5. And I understand that, our legislature can define agricultural uses and expand upon that, but you've got a definition within your easement that would control. And as Dr. Moses pointed out, the easement should control with respect to the uses on the property, if it's more restrictive.
I'm sorry, it won't quite all fit on the screen, but I can scroll down if you all need me
The
to.
last
Yeah,
sentence.
I can,
Last sentence.
I think we can see what we need to see, Scott.
There's some more down here about
The processing of agricultural
uses within permitted buildings.
products.
Subsection 5.
I mean, it seems to me it already basically prohibits any commercial or industrial use, period.
So it always comes down to this issue of agriculture is a
Yeah,
form of commercial activity.
Right. What's defined? How do you define agriculture? Is the nut?
Yep. Yeah,
Well,
always has been.
And Mr. Moore, I'd suggest, so in terms of the numbered paragraphs, number 5, which I think Scott was referring to, talks about activities that can be conducted within the permitted buildings. It's not considered to be commercial or industrial. So it includes the tourist lodging.
But I wouldn't say that, for example, a tasting room, that maybe it took place in that building, but if it had parking and other facilities that didn't fit in that building, that's not to me what that means. This to me is talking about things like home offices, a carpenter shop in a permitted barn, something like that. Something that requires a lot more infrastructure on the ground, I wouldn't think would fall under that section.
And I would just, as being a lawyer, would say that would be subject to debate.
Thanks, Richie.
Sorry, there are cases on it.
I'm an attorney and I don't play one on television.
Yeah. I mean, the whole language about tourist lodging is curious. It's as if it pre-assumed the VRBO Airbnb era that we have now, and what's included in all of that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty.
I'm not
pretty
sure, but I think
prescient.
that's unique to this deed. I don't think this was standard for ACE at the time.
Yeah.
Anyway,
As everyone knows, zoning has taking a close look on the whole short-term rental issue and what's permitted and what's not permitted. So it's not as though that's the Wild West in terms of activity.
Right.
So the IRS is the one that looks over our shoulder on all this. So what have they weighed in on this issue of agriculture and agricultural tourism and wedding
Remember,
venue?
this is a purchased easement, so
Yeah,
this
this is
wouldn't
not a
have
donation. Yeah, it was
They don't care. Okay.
No, not in this regard.
Okay.
it is an interesting question to be thought out at another time, though, David. That's
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because farming, crops, livestock, all of that is commercial anyway, in some regard. All right, where do we go from here? So I feel like we have.
we need to make some sort of a decision.
Right.
So I thought that the table that had the list of properties that were sort of in the same range of size, and the size of the permitted dwellings there, I thought that was instructive, but it's not definitive necessarily, because those are all different properties, and Peter's point well taken on that score. But it's at least a launching pad. If you were to say, well, if 7,000 or 7,500, whatever the number is, it's sort of the maximum that's permitted without coming back to us. And if you were going to consolidate the square footage of the accessory dwellings, the thought being, well, if they really want a big house, maybe they'd be willing to give up the accessory dwellings, because once you've got a 12,000 square foot house, what do you need, a guest house? Sort of thing. You know, that sort of gets you into the ballpark of what they want, or close there too. And at that point, you're arguing about 1,000, 2,000, 2,500 square feet, one way or the other. And visually or any other way, does that size difference make any difference? I don't know. I would be interested in hearing from the applicant whether or not, if they wanted us to approve an 11,500 square foot main house, whether they have any inkling of giving up the accessory dwellings entirely, or do we care?
You know, I mean, this is, I've been with this body for how many years? And this issue, all of them, you're right. But this issue of square foot envy sort of thing, it's like, wow. And do you really need that? And without regard to whether or not it impacts the view shed issues or water runoff issues. I mean, what is the basis for our concern about how big a single dwelling? It's not an apartment complex. It's a single dwelling. The amount of traffic isn't affected whether it's 7,000 or 12,000. Runoff might be, but I'm just curious what our concern is about that upper level on the single family dwelling.
Well, I think precedence has, it's instructive. It doesn't rule, but it has something to say about norms, I expect.
I'm not denying it. We're looking at a table that sums part of that up. It's just asking again, why is it we had a 14,000 square foot one that got in our, all know about that one. So, but I don't find that to be a major issue. I'm listening. I'm listening for why, other than the precedent. But what you could, I don't know when the precedent got set for 7,500.
Right.
So I would just take a stab at it. I think that what we're talking about, and this came up in the timbering issue, is the view shed and the scenic nature of an area. So to me, again, with conservation easements, one size does not fit all. And the question becomes, is this consistent with the neighborhood? Is it going to be a visual impairment from the road, or out of character with the neighborhood? And I don't see it. And again, I won't go through all the chapter and verse, but I live in I don't know how big it is, 10,000, 11,000 square foot house. And, some people may say it's crazy. It's been there a long time. I don't see the issue here. Particularly, to me, what giving up the size of accessory dwellings, because large accessory dwellings start to look like neighborhoods, is a significant concession when there's no size spelled out in the old easement. To me, that's really the meat of the matter, not the size of the main house. So I don't, for whatever it's worth, Dave, I don't see an issue with larger houses in this neighborhood.
I'd just like to interrupt for a second and ask Carolyn if we have a time cutoff today. Just given that we have a couple of other items to get to, and I'm hoping we aren't ending at 6:15.
This one tonight, so you can.
So we can continue on this. Okay, thanks.
You can run over.
Peter, I'm sensitive to your reasoning. My suggestion of a 25% increment of the originally approved square footage would accomplish a great deal in that it gets us out of the business of saying that 11,005 and 2000s are in their own way arbitrary.
Yep.
So add up the 7,000 that would have been permitted and the 1339 that was there and the 3,500, and there you've got an envelope.
And Scott, refresh my memory again, I'm not the applicant. What is that number?
Just using the calculator, just getting there. Those three buildings, so the 7,000 plus the two dwellings were there, would have added up to 12,539. And I think we're talking about 11,500 plus 4,000 is 15,500 under the current proposal. If we take the original permitted 12,500 plus, multiply that by 1.25, we get 15,673. So it's pretty close.
I wasn't referring to 25% of the total. I was referring to 25% of the 7,000.
Oh, sorry, misunderstood. So should have been able to do that in my head. 25% over the 7,000 would have been 8,750.
Going back to the point I was making before, is like, well, once you have 8750 on the ground, you know, can you tell from the road whether it's 11.5 or 8750? At some point you start splitting hairs. I mean, I think we're on the horns of a dilemma here. But I think we need to be both reasonable, and we also need to be, you know, good stewards of the program that we're in charge of. So.
Well, if we,
Brian, can I ask you, following along? I'm sorry.
go ahead.
Brian, I was just going to say, following along what John Moore kind of was going down the path, if we were to say, okay, to take the single family dwelling, we're calling the main dwelling, to the 11.5 number. And because there's an existing cottage there that could use some renovations and some increased square footage up to 2,000, would you consider saying, I'll release one of the accessory dwellings because I've increased the size of the single family main dwelling?
Yes. I mean, if that's the spirit of the board, if that's you know, I feel like we're very close, and I know there are some concerns with any sort of, you know, back and forth or negotiating here, and that's not the spirit of what I'm attempting here. But I you know what, for the sake of movement on this, that would be amenable if that would kind of resolve the board's concerns and get us everywhere to, as I said at the beginning, a pretty happy place for all parties.
Somebody make a motion.
What are we making? The motion that one of the 2,000 will be extinguished?
Correct.
And that
I'll
the
make a
other be
motion.
limited to 2,000?
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the main dwelling size at 11,500 feet and one accessory dwelling not to exceed 2,000 square feet.
I will second that motion.
Can I ask for a clarification? The existing cottage on the property would count as the accessory,
Yes.
so long as it remains
Yes.
standing?
Yes,
Okay.
that would be my, and again, I'm not, Brian, do you?
Yes, to answer your question, so long as the cottage remains standing, we would, that will count as the accessory dwelling, not in addition to the cottage.
So you would just
But I
expand that to the
think
2,000?
I assume so. We haven't gone through and made any sort of renovation plans or kind of really gone in there. It looks like a very nice home, you know, so we have no intention of tearing it down to put something else up. So yeah, that would probably remain the dwelling. But in the event of a, I don't know, an act of God, a tornado comes through, I don't want there to be some sort of fight with you guys down the line. That
Just to clarify here, I believe what I seconded was a main dwelling of 11,500 square feet and one accessory dwelling to include the existing one not to exceed 2,000. Is that what you move, Peter?
Yes.
So
Yes.
can I ask a question for clarification? If something were to happen to the accessory dwelling, they would not be able to replace it?
Yeah, no, they could with a 2,000 square foot replacement.
Right, so if something were to happen to the existing cottage, you still have the right to do one accessory dwelling up to 2,000 square feet.
Yes.
It's typically the way we do it,
Okay.
because unfortunately things burn and fall down.
So there was a motion on the floor in a second. Should we take it to a vote?
Yeah, do we have Jay? We might need him for a quorum.
Where did he go?
He's in the process of coming back.
Okay, well, as soon as he does, before we lose him again.
Carolyn, could you, there you go. Okay,
I've been here the whole time. I just wasn't a panelist.
Did we have a second? Did Dr. Moses second? I can't.
Yes.
I did.
Dr. Moses seconded it, yes. All right, so roll call vote.
We're done with discussion.
Sounds like it.
All right. Let's see, Sharon Merritt,
Aye.
Rose Emery,
Aye.
John Moore,
Aye.
let's see, Dave Emmett,
Aye.
Hamilton Moses, Dr. Moses,
Aye.
Sherry's absent. Let's see, Vice Chair Taylor
Aye.
and Chair Fennell.
Aye.
So the motion passes. Just as a reminder, this is an ACE easement, so it's co-held by the Board of Supervisors. So any action towards amending the easement or formalizing it all will be subject to the Board of Supervisors approval.
Well, I just want to say thank you all very, very much for all of your time and your diligence, your thoughtful commentary, and I think we did a great work to improve the land. And I hope to, once Music Hall is finished, invite you all over and we can get this group back together in virtual and non-virtual worlds.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you all very much for
Thank
working
you.
with us.
Thank you, guys.
Of course, happy to. Thanks for all your energies.
Thanks for your
Thank you.
patience.
All right. How are we for time? Do we have a Zoom limit?
sounds like we're okay for now.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's no meeting
Alright.
after this one, so you guys can keep going.
not that we plan to extend this any further, so can we move on? Did you have a question, Rose?
I have a limit of 6:30.
Okay, all right. So Scott, can we move to the Dudera? Is that
All right. So, and the donor is here. I'm reluctant to butcher the pronunciation of her name, but I hope she'll be able to join in the discussion as needed. So this is a proposal you all saw last month and requested more information on. This is a 80-acre almost property just off of Markwood Road that would eliminate 6 potential dwellings. And here's a map of the property. And as we discussed last time, the main issue here as far as developability is this long driveway that exists on some fairly narrow access easements. I've got a typo in this slide, I apologize. You all had asked for more information on the current developability of this property. It currently has the theoretical potential for 8 dwellings, not 7 as I typed here, 5 small lots and 3 21s. And the authority was concerned to know more about what could actually be done with the property now, given current regulations and given the current access. So right now it is a property with 2 dwellings, and it could be divided into 2 to put those dwellings on separate lots. But given the access limitations, that's the most that could be done right now, would be that 2-lot subdivision. And that's entirely because of the access issues, not due to any inherent qualities of the property that limit development. So the scenarios that would enable those 7 theoretical rights to be used would include acquisition of either land or better access easements from 6 intervening landowners between this property and Markwood Road, or purchase of adjoining parcels that have their own road access, or some future changes that we don't now anticipate in zoning and subdivision regulations that relate to access. And just to review, if you all are considering the donation, it's located in the North Fork Ravenna water supply area. It has 52 acres of important soils, and it does meet another conservation easement property in the northeast corner. The proposal was for the 2 existing dwellings with room for some expansion on each. Otherwise, it's all standard terms and includes a 35-foot riparian buffer. So I hope that additional information is helpful to you. And if she was able to get in, I believe the landowner is here to answer your questions as well.
All right, thank you, Scott. Any thoughts from the panel? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'm seeing this for the first time. I'm curious, what the concerns from the other directors are.
It's largely about the difference between the theoretical development potential of 8 total dwellings, but the reality of current restrictions, which means that the 2 current dwellings are pretty much all there that can be as things currently stand. So in the near to medium term, the real development potential is quite limited. In the longer term, we don't know what it might be, because some future owner might acquire one of these other surrounding properties or find another way to provide access.
So, Scott, if I'm not mistaken, is it a 25-foot deeded right of way from Markwood up to the property?
It varies between 20 and 25 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd have to be a pretty strong-willed developer, but that's not to make that access doable, but it's not unheard of.
Yeah, it would take a lot of work and a lot of coordination with those other 6 landowners. On the other hand,
Right.
if they purchased a property and were able to get access directly to Markwood by buying one of these other or over to Claymont, then the problem goes away.
Understood. Thank you.
So Scott, I just looked up on the county map to see what parcel the easement runs through. And if I looked it up right, it looks like it's a 27.5 acre parcel that has the easement running through, and the current owners purchased that in 2020. I don't know. 27.5 acres has the easement. I think that's a lot of futuristic talk about what could be on the potential divisions on the backside. And for John's question, it was Sherry that brought up the concern of what's the existing development rights available to them under the current situation. And that's why it got tabled for more information. But I was against trying to do something now and bring it back later when you've got more access and more real development rights.
I feel badly in saying this, but it is what it is. And the fact that there are not in its current form more than 2 development rights, to my way of thinking, truncates the conservation value of an easement and the associated land use taxes, et cetera. If this didn't have the entrance restrictions and it could be fully developed, it would be a good easement, but in its current form, to my way of thinking, it doesn't meet the high enough hurdle that we need to ensure to take an easement on it. I would also point out that the county, the Board of Supervisors has recently looked at the tax implications of conservation easements, and they're positive, but I think we need to be judicious in the application of easements and the related land use taxation in cases where there's a speculative element on what we're really eliminating.
Scott, not to put you on the button here, but what's staff recommendation?
Well, I originally, I'm not muted. I originally recommended that you all accept this, largely because my concern was that there's, high quality soils here and quite a bit of development potential if some other landowner were to acquire this and another property. I definitely acknowledge that the current situation makes it very unlikely that this property would be developed, but I'm trying to look at the long term, and that this could become part of a larger subdivision if it's not protected.
Yeah, that's my concern too, because it's clear, it's open, it's, if accessed, it's almost ready-made for development, given the existing interior roads also.
There isn't going to be much in the way of tax incentive. An appraisal
You're right.
isn't going to take a futuristic look at this. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be any financial benefit to doing this easement.
No, but I mean, yeah, you're right.
Not much. If that's the motivation or part of it, then
There may be land use taxation implication, though.
yeah, that's
there are other routes to doing that. The landowner could join an Act 4 district or do an open space agreement.
Is the owner here?
Yes, and they have it noted as land use. I don't have the details, but a vast majority of the acreage might already be under land use.
Yep.
Mr. Dare, do you have anything to add? Possibly not.
And Andrea, are you there? Can you hear us?
You're muted.
Can you hear me
Yeah.
now?
There we go.
There you. Hi, Andrea.
Hi. Well, I bought this property 14 years ago and was told I had 5 family subdivision rights. And I have 5 adult children. So I bought it. And at the time of purchase, I had a contingency on the contract to perk the land. So I perked it for all those residences, thinking I would give each child some land to build a house on, and we'd have a family enclave. And now I've lived here 14 years and I love it, and I never want to see it changed. So it is in land use. It has been from the get-go. I don't know, I'm leaving everything to my children when I die. I don't know what they might do with it. My understanding is it could be subdivided. They could each have some property. They'd only have to hold it for 4 years and they could sell it to someone outside the family and use that access road. So I'm looking at the future. I realize that there's not going to be any huge tax benefit for me to do this, but I put a lot of work in on this farm and it's beautiful and I like to see it stay that way.
Thanks.
Scott, could you review again the elements of the proposal? What's being, how many rights are being extinguished and what further developments being allowed?
Right. So get back to the table here. The property has theoretical potential for 8 dwellings. It currently has 2. So the easement would allow those 2 to remain and be slightly enlarged. So 6 rights are being eliminated if you're counting the theoretical potential. This table shows the resources to be protected, public water supply, prime soils, and adjacency to other protected land. The proposed terms would be no subdivisions, the 2 existing dwellings with some slight room for increase in size to a fixed limit. Standard terms otherwise with a 35-foot riparian buffer as shown on this map.
I would speak in favor of accepting this easement for the reasons that you've outlined, but also part of the rationale of a conservation easement is to protect an open space forever. And even if the area around it is developed to its maximum potential in 50 or 100 years, to have green space that is open is of considerable value. This one is directly adjacent to another easement, and it qualifies on that basis also. And I think that Mrs. Duder's motivation needs to be weighed considerably. That is the essence of conservation. It is to preserve as it is today with a minimum of change. And that's a very compelling reason to accept an easement this time.
Thanks, Dr. Moses.
So let me ask the landowner a quick question. Have you tried to acquire a more robust easement into the property, or is that a possibility?
I have not tried to. At one time, I was told that there was a 40-foot right-of-way that Haley Chisholm Morris left on the Indian Springs development, but I went to the courthouse prior to talking to Scott Clark and I could not find it. So they told me that they had left it there for future development from Indian Springs. I don't think it exists.
Okay.
I haven't looked into it because I don't want to develop it.
Yep. I get it.
This is the fact that the access currently is restricted is not necessarily a major impediment to future development to its highest density. And this is a legal issue that Richie needs to comment on, but there's all sorts of law on the problem of stranded property. And developers are using that own set of ambiguities to get access to properties that otherwise would not be available, particularly if there's an existing easement. It's happened just down the road from me in southern Albemarle County. So I think there is reason to think that the access limitation would be obviated in the future by some kind of finagling or another. Again, adding to the rationale for accepting it.
The impediments are not insurmountable. Richie, on the family subdivision thing, is that subject to a different set of criteria as far as the access easement is concerned? Can you do your family subdivisions on less right of way than you would a regular subdivision?
So I don't think I can answer that without looking at the deeds with the access easements. So it might be a separate issue in terms of the family divisions and then overusing the easement that was granted. So I can't answer that for certain, but as the applicant has described, there would be some by right ability to place some other family dwellings on there. Whether the easement accommodates that or not, the access easement, I can't answer that. And so that could be a dispute with the landowners whose property serves the easement. So I don't know off the top of my head right now. I do know that the Claymont Homeowners Association owns vacant land. I don't know if that's the southeast corner of the property. And I don't know if that would be, we'd have to check with planning to see whether that would be susceptible to another access to the property. I don't know what impediments there would be in that respect.
Well, if there is a sense that we should accept, I'll make a motion to accept.
Please
I
do.
will second that. Did you make
I
a
will-
motion, Chip?
Yes, I'll move that we accept the easement as proposed.
All right,
I will
and
second that.
Mr. Taylor seconds. Further discussion? You're on mute, Sharon. Sharon, you're muted.
Yeah, I do have a question. So are you proposing that the property be placed under conservation easement, but still have the 5 family division rights or the ability to do 5 houses?
Yeah, the proposal's for 2 houses.
And Scott, I'll clarify, there's an existing, the proposals for the existing essentially 3,000 square foot house that could be expanded to 4,500 square feet. And there's an existing 450 square foot dwelling. And the request is to allow that and a replacement up to 1,000 square feet. And that it would just be the 2 dwellings.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I see the definite concept. This, as Chip said, I think this is not necessarily a poster child for what we do, but it just seems like a very straightforward open space easement for what we're built for, also, so to speak. If there's not further discussion, we can go ahead and put it to the vote. Okay, Richie.
Sharon Merritt,
Aye.
let's see, Rose Emery,
Aye.
John Moore,
Aye.
Dave Emmett,
Aye.
Dr. Moses,
Aye.
Sherry's absent. Let's see, Mr. Taylor,
Aye.
Mr. Fennell.
Aye.
So it passes unanimously.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all you're doing.
Andrea, I'll be in touch soon to talk about the next steps.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. Do we need to discuss the meeting?
The remote participation policy is up next.
Yep.
So that'd be a quick discussion. I had circulated the policy for everyone to review. Since then, the Board of Supervisors has not acted on their policy or on the model policy. So they've asked that we defer our consideration of a policy until our September meeting. And I think that's September 8th. The one thing I want to clarify is it may be that there are some members who are wary of meeting in person. The September 8th meeting will be in person. So what the plan is hopefully a quorum will meet in person, and that after we call the meeting to order and establish a quorum, then the first matter of business will be the remote participation policy and the all virtual meeting policy. Assuming that is adopted, then if there's other members who have requested to participate remotely, then we can vote to allow those members to, not we or the body can vote to allow those members to participate remotely. I will say by way of background, and I think this is just kind of a cloud that's overshadowing everything, is there's concern about meeting in person with the risk of contracting the COVID. The Virginia FOIA Council has considered that, and if there is concern of that a member might be at risk of contracting it and wants to participate remotely for medical reasons, the FOIA Council has approved that. So I don't have, and again, even when we're talking about medical reasons, the specifics aren't in question. The minutes don't have to address the specifics, excuse me. And I think the way it has operated in the past and should operate is it's just trust for the individual members to make that call.
Great. Thanks, Richie.
I'll take questions. I'm sorry we couldn't move forward today, but the Board of Supervisors has asked that we defer until then, and I think we can make it work.
Okay, great. Thanks for the update on that. Is there any new business? So with Jenny Moore gone, we have an opening, correct?
Right.
We should, you guys kind of pick your brains and see who we could cultivate to bring onto the body.
Does it have to be from a specific district?
No.
Okay.
Jay, will you be collecting names for that, or who would be the point person?
I can do, I'm happy to do that and make contact with them also. That's fine. You know, I feel like we've got a good diversity of representation. And so, you know, picking somebody that you may not see eye to eye with isn't such a bad thing also. Any old business? Well, we got a lot done today. Good work, folks. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Seconded, denied. Gentlemen, Scott, Richard, thank you all very much.
Thank you all very much.
All
Thanks
right.
for your input. Appreciate it.
Evening.